Well, hello. I am so excited to have everybody here in our first ALN in the Lounge. Welcome to the coffee shop. Today, we're talking about perception pays. And does it matter what we wear, what we post, what we say? So, some really quick statistics that started this conversation. 80% or 86% of workers and 80% of managers believe that clothing choices affect a person's chances of being promoted. And 44% of those managers have spoken to an employee about inappropriate attire. 32% have sent employees home based on what they were wearing. And of this group who had these conversations, half were comfortable with them, 35% felt awkward about it, and 15% didn't want to have that conversation at all. And it's that 15% that really concerns me. And Des, who is going to introduce herself very shortly here, Des, when you and I had this conversation, to me, that was like the most important thing is what happens if somebody's not approaching us and the doors are just closing? So with that, let me turn myself over. And Des, why don't I ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Desiree Thomas. I'm at Low Key Consulting, among other things. I work with Kathleen on the Channel Sierra podcast. You should check that out if you want to know anything about sales and marketing. I'm super excited to be here. Kathleen and I had been having several different conversations about that exact question and about, okay, well, if nobody is telling people that they should or what is appropriate or what you should or should not, and yet these rules are so important that it literally shapes your career. And if no one's telling anyone, then shouldn't we be having a conversation? Because how do we support the people around us and make sure that they know that the people that are looking at hiring them are having these conversations when we're not in the room? So super excited for the talk today and just can't wait.
All right, Jen, introduce yourself.
Well, first and foremost, happy Friday. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and allies. Kathleen, thank you for having me. I'm Jen Waltz. I'm the Vice President of Global Channels at Crone Technologies. We're a cybersecurity firm. And as a person who has been in technology for the greater part of 2 decades, and as a woman of color, I can tell you first and foremost, the way that I present myself determines how people pay respect and also take me seriously as a business partner. And so I do believe that this is going to be a very informative conversation. I definitely believe as a leader, bringing your authentic self to the workplace, but also understanding that perceptions really drive decisions in rooms when you are not present. So definitely looking forward to this insightful and informative conversation today.
Kelsey.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kelsey Blankenship Lackland, and I am with Infima Cybersecurity. I'm really excited to be here today. Obviously, I'm in good company with Des, but as a pink-haired person in this space, I definitely have had some comments and opinions said to me. I can't imagine what's said behind my back. And I'm always very bright, colorful, and sparkly. So it's an interesting time to be in technology. But yes, thank you for having me.
Noelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Noelle. I'm at Crow, which is a professional services company, and my work is in DEI. So I'm excited about this conversation. First, it's kind of echoing what Jen says, as a Black woman, having an understanding of what it means to show up in a space and some of the judgments that can come up on how my appearance is, but also in the DEI space, really challenging what is professionalism, what the norm should be or shouldn't be, and where are some places that we're actually causing a gap in how somebody gets ahead that needs to be shifted.
And last, not least in any way, Sue Krautbauer.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm Susan Krautbauer, and I am representing and work in the digital equity space, as well as in my own consulting firm, Susan Krautbauer Consulting. And I help folks, especially focusing primarily on what I call aspiring entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, go further, faster, both in their career as well as in business aspirations. But I'm also very deeply involved, and Noelle, you and I need to talk because I'm very deeply involved in digital equity through an organization called Digitunity, working across the country in implementing and designing digital equity plans for the infrastructure money, the $65 billion in infrastructure money coming down. I bring, God bless you, Jen. I bring more than 2 decades of experience both in the technology space as well as a business owner, and have seen and fought very hard in the transition of women having a place at the table in the technology tower, including and Kathleen does know this. One of the things I'm most proud of is being one of the co-founders of Advancing Women in IT Community at CompTIA. So, got a passion for this, and also have a lot of lessons learned, and shall we say, been bitten that took us a few times in this area, and so very excited to talk about this.
Fantastic. Well, let's start off, Des, in talking about kind of what prompted this conversation. Should it matter, in your opinion, what we wear when we go to a business show? Should it matter?
I'm so excited for this conversation, but I hate it so much. Yes and no should be the answer, but it I agree and I understand because I've had this conversation so many times over the last month before setting this up. Like literally every room I'm in, I'm having this conversation. And I do understand that wearing pajamas to work is not a good idea. Like I get it. There should be a level of professionalism. But the problem, especially in the tech space, is that jeans and a t-shirt is professional. But tights, like jeans that are skin tight is professional, but tights aren't professional. But a t-shirt is professional, but a tank top isn't professional. But a t-shirt that sits too high isn't professional, but a t-shirt that sits too low, or even better, if any of you guys have been in where you have uniforms, where your t-shirt is a men's large shirt because that's the only option. So now you're putting women in men's clothing and saying, this looks professional. This is the standard. And this is the way you best look. But if you put on a dress and it sits above your knees, that is unprofessional. If you have a tank top or if your shirt's cut too low, that is unprofessional. And then we struggle onwards.
Jen, what would you add to that?
Oh man, I mean, it's like going down this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole because it's like different rules for different people. And, I'm all for, I started in this industry when I was 19 and I was coached. And I started at Microsoft, and I remember distinctly, they put me through leadership classes and gave me coaching on what to wear, intonation, how to present myself, because I was and am a woman of color, and they wanted me to command a room. So my experience is going to be very different than yours, Desiree, in terms of comportment. Now, I believe right now, again, in technology, brilliance does not define what you wear. But when you're thinking about how women, especially, are judged harshly on perceptions because we are still the minority in the workplace, and there's this double-edged standard for women, right? Men can come and they just look like they rolled out of bed to an event show, like literally the jeans and t-shirt and gym shoes. But if a woman happens to wear leggings and a t-shirt and some gym shoes, she's considered to be inappropriately dressed. So I think it's all about your better judgment and what works for you, and maybe how you establish first impression meetings, right? I think first impression meetings give you more leeway later on, if that makes sense. I'd be curious to hear what Noelle says, definitely.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts because I think that it really depends on the situation, on what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. But I think of how you want to be able to show up in a space and what the perceptions is. At the end of the day, bias exists. It's something that's inescapable. We have a gut feeling when we see somebody. And I know if I see somebody in a suit that it's more likely that I'm going to have this kind of conversation versus if I talk to somebody who's in flip flops and a tattered t-shirt, right? I think that at the baseline, having something that's not offensive is like the most obvious. We should never go into work like that. But I know if I'm going to be speaking on stage, and maybe there is a t-shirt that I want to wear, if I'm wearing slacks and a blazer, and that is the fit of what I'm seeing a lot of people in technology doing right now, that's fine. And I can wear sneakers and that's great. Whereas if I'm speaking in front of a group of lawyers, that might not be the right vibe. So it's like understanding with the rooms that you're in and the kind of influence that you're trying to have on certain spaces. I also know if I'm showing up on camera, I don't feel comfortable just showing up anyway, because I do get judged more. Like I can't show up on camera with just a messy bun and, you know, a t-shirt that's like kind of hanging off, and where I can't, because I'm judged at a much different level than some of my peers who aren't the same ethnicity as I am. So having an awareness of that, I think, is important. But while it would be great for us to change the perceptions of everything and challenge everybody's biases right away and shake up these systems, it just doesn't happen overnight. It happens very slowly, and we are seeing it some with allowing people to wear jeans to work. But I think that there's definitely some room for us to continue to push that forward. But you know, there's definitely a balance in the way that we want to be perceived by others. And yes, our voices carry on so much more than just what we're wearing. What we have in our character, what we have to show, has to matter more than what we're showing up as. But it is that first entryway and what somebody's initial thoughts are on how we're going to interact. And I don't want to have to go through additional barriers to be able to get through to the person I need to get to.
Yeah.
Kelsey, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a different perspective here. I started my professional career post-COVID. I graduated college in 2019. I worked in an office before 2020, but majority of my career has been in a post-COVID world. So I've done so much of my job virtually. And I think that a little bit radicalized the way I approach professionalism, because I was raised in a household that you don't go outside without makeup on. We did not wear sweatpants. We did not own anything baggy. Like my mom was very particular, Southern woman. You represent me. We are going to look nice and put together when we go out. And I did not own a pair of sweatpants until COVID. And I was started to be like, oh, is this okay? So that translated into my working space. Interestingly, like I thought I couldn't be professional with my nose ring in, and I took it out when I was interviewing, but then I was like, I'm sitting at a computer all day. Even if I am in person, like, you know, I had this whole, why does it matter? And then working in this space is interesting because, like Des mentioned, we've got the big t-shirts. I've had the opposite end. I've had very small t-shirts where I'm like, I can't wear this, but it's what was given to me. And I was later told that my tight shirts were not getting me the right attention. And I was like, well, this is the shirt I was provided that I argued. I've also struggled with presenting on stage. I felt like I was a little bit on an island during that process because I didn't understand how to get these crowds of mostly men to take me seriously when I was on stage as a younger woman showing up in whatever I was provided for work. So I've kind of had a journey of learning how to present myself on a stage better and have that also translate to standing at a booth for 14 hours. You know, heels are great, but there's got to be another pair of shoes in the bag. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I'm really happy that we can all share our experiences here, though.
Yeah.
So Sue, you and I have done this. I don't want to say the longest, but
That's okay.
Perhaps we've been at this since that time where there was a formal dress code for women in the office. So what are your thoughts about where we are today?
Well, there's been some really great concepts and ideas and challenges already shared, and I'm going to try not to go over the same things, but maybe touch or punctuate on some of the great things that have been already spoken about, and that is things like, are you in a customer facing role, right? Which is much different than an internal role. Doesn't have to be much different, but oftentimes it's much different. And when you start thinking about that, you start thinking about, and I believe it was Noelle that spoke about, reading your audience, right? So if you kind of think about what you're wearing as your costume, that is going to be providing perception. And we all know that perception is reality, and those first impressions are important. It's, who are you going to? Are you going to a lawyer or a corporate, a Fortune 500 to present? Or are you going to a very eclectic design studio? However, whatever, read your audience and make choices about the persona that you are building for yourself that matches the audience that you're going to. So that's on a outward facing, and that includes on stage, in presentations, and just going on, visits to your clients or customers. Then you start thinking about internal audience, right? And that goes more to being your authentic self, which I absolutely am 100% in favor of, but understanding that there is also a corporate culture within an organization. And that is finding a good balance between who your authentic self is and how does that fit into the culture that you see in the corporate world. When, kind of, Kelsey, I love that you say, my mom used to say this, and don't get out and I'm, honey, you're singing my song, because I can still hear my mother in my mind, right? But I also got some really great advice, and Jen, maybe you heard this as well, in that, especially if you have aspirations to move up and potentially move up quickly within an organization, look at the people 2 or 3 levels above you. And it's sort of like, you always dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have, right? So think about it. And if this is helpful, and maybe less focused on the technology and just overall, when you start thinking about that and you take it in a context of cultural sensitivity. So as an example, if you're going to the Middle East and you know that the cultural norms of that country mean that women should cover their heads and wear long sleeves and things like that, you will it's really about respecting the culture that you're in, including a corporate culture, and finding that balance between who you authentically are and how you present yourself. So maybe taking it less about a personal, how would I put this? A personal affront or attack on yourself, and thinking more about, am I dressing to the corporate culture I live in? And if I might, Kathleen, and I don't know if this will transition, but also that may, as I spoke about before, helping mentor and coach women, especially women entrepreneurs and career seekers. Think about the corporate culture and look very carefully as you are looking for an organization. Does your authentic self fit with, and are you comfortable with, I'm going to go way back in the archives to say, back in the day, Perot Industries. If you were, you always knew what we used to call a pierogi is, and that is a blue blazer, male or female, a neat tie. That's those ugly, nasty old guy ties, right? No character in the tie. And for women, it was a bow tie, one of those floppy bow ties, right? With a suit and khaki pants or blue pants, and or a blue dress. And oh, for the love of Pete, you got to wear hose. Oh, and those are the devil's the devil's tools. I'm telling you, right? But think about it. That was the corporate culture in the day. So it's really important to read your audience, internal and external, and in many cases, is this a good fit for me? Is this where I want to live and be? So that's just I'll climb off my soapbox for a moment.
Well, we've all had a moment to be on that soapbox. So let's talk just a bit, kind of changing the topic here. We had some conversations as a group before we started this. And Noelle, you and I have both received some comments that probably we wished we hadn't received in our career. I was told at one point that I was making more than enough money to drive a different kind of car and that I should overextend myself to the kind of car that this executive thought was appropriate. I believe you had a comment about a handbag.
Yes, if you want to be able to get to a certain level, you want to be taken seriously, you need to have a designer handbag. And it shouldn't be the Michael Kors. It should be a very nice luxury designer bag if you want to be able to get into the spaces where you want to go, because that's like I was told it's like a ticket to be able to get into those spaces. They'll see you as somebody who is ready to be in those spaces.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
it's something.
I guess my backpack doesn't work, right?
It's interesting, but I think that advice, I don't think was meant to do harm. I think that it was something that they really could see, and this was at an organization where you could see the level that all the women worked at by the type of bags that they had. If you knew who were the executives, you knew who was mid-level, you knew who was entry-level simply by what they had as a purse. And that's just the way that it was organized. So, she's letting me know, hey, just if that's where you're trying to go, that's what you're going to need to have. And I'm like, well, that's expensive. So, it's something that, am I getting paid for that luxury bag, or, is that going to be a gift? Because I don't know. And I think that that's something that we have to think about when it comes to dress codes as well, is, are there financial barriers in some of these dress codes that are out there? Because sometimes there are. It has to be able to make sense, and it has to be really aligned with who you are and your own personal brand and how you want to be able to show up.
I can remember so many years ago going to shows, and I always wore 4.5 to 5 inch heels. Now, it wasn't because I loved wearing heels, although I do love a good shoe. I will tell you, it was so that I stood eye to eye with the gentleman so that they couldn't look down my shirt.
Oh.
It wasn't that I was making it, that it had to do anything with how I'm built or who I am. It was just, I knew that if they were forced to look at me in the face, there was something different. Today, I'd rather throw on a sweatshirt and sneakers and just tell you to deal with it. Mm-hmm. But that was the culture in the 90s when I was coming up through business shows. That was a requirement, is that we looked a certain way. I had a uniform, and that uniform included those very specific heels. I today authentically could not ask another individual to walk those miles and do the damage to their bodies that generations of women have done. And Sue, to your point, I remember the first time I saw a naked leg and thought, ooh, are we allowed to do that now? Can we do that now? Like, I don't want to put those things on anymore. Like that was some freedom. And so there we had somebody that said, you know what? I'm done with it. Not going to wear these. All of a sudden Converse became a thing, or, upscale Keds, or your Kate Spade Keds, or whatever it is, your Rothbys, anything that somebody wanted to wear on their feet, and somebody had to lead the trail. So Des, you and I have talked about this. How do we change the norm?
I'm going to pull back here a little bit, because you guys have all said several amazing things. But there is 2 common themes that I'm going to say. Each one of you have said that at some point, someone told you what was appropriate and what was not, based on their opinion and their views of what they see as successful. And each one of those things has been on a different scale. Time, yes, changes, things change. I can speak to when it wasn't even that long ago, like 8 years ago, my very first channel presentation, I had slides on, and I only had I had full length sleeves, and I had one small tattoo, and I got pulled down off stage afterwards by a gentleman who didn't want to ask about the product, but told me that I would not be successful if I had my tattoos showing on stage. I've also been told before that if I cannot get by based on my personality and being happy and being cheeky, I need to prove that I'm smart as well, or I will not succeed. And then there was one other thing, Jen, you started with the very beginning, and it's just been sitting in my head. I was trained. I was in a position that I went through a class and was trained. So on all of these things, the sliding scale of what's appropriate has completely changed a million times in your careers. When Noelle, you had said that you were told that to get to a certain level, you had to get a nice purse. My mouth dropped. Like I dropped. I was shocked because that is so far from any thought in my head. I know like the baselines of what I should and should not do, but if that's a baseline and now that's a baseline, and then we go back to the tights being a baseline, and I'm what else am I supposed to be doing? And then we're also supposed to be learning from our peers what's appropriate and what's not. And then how we said, well, dress for the job that's too above you. I want to work in tech. So isn't that always jeans and a t-shirt? Why should I have to wear anything else? If everybody in tech that's high up is in jeans and a t-shirt, why does it matter what I wear? I don't know how to fix these things, but I just needed to highlight all of that because that is, to me, the entire problem in the conversation is that we are forcing people from different viewpoints, different education levels, different society norms, different cultural, different backgrounds, all of those things to understand there is an appropriate, and that appropriate is this. And somewhere in between, and will scale drastically differently anywhere. And so therefore someone is thinking you're inappropriate anyways.
Oh, 100%, Desiree. I mean, you mentioned clothing. I think we've all mentioned articles of clothing. We haven't even touched on how we show up on the premier professional network of LinkedIn. And I can share with you. Okay, so but very quickly, Kathleen mentioned gym shoes. Did you know? So I had someone say this to me about Golden Goose gym shoes. I don't know if you guys know how much Golden Goose gym shoes are, but they're about $600. And so it was, so when women at a prior company I worked for would show up with jeans and a blazer and gym shoes, guaranteed they were $600 gym shoes, right? And so you go, okay, well, do I want to wear this $100 pair of naturalizers that are comfortable on my feet, or do I want to wear these $600 pair of gym shoes that nobody's compensating me for? I think I'm gonna do the naturalizers. You know what I mean? So it's pretty funny, but also at the same time, when you're active on LinkedIn, and we all know it is a tool to improve at your brand awareness, not only for yourself, but your company. There are people who don't, let's just say I'm a prolific user of LinkedIn and messaging. And because number one, I want people to know I'm authentic. I can talk about cybersecurity all day long, but do you want to hear that from me? People do business with who they like, right? And if I'm showing people who I am genuinely and authentically, it will translate into more business opportunities. And I remember certain segments of society at a prior employer having an issue with how often I posted, what I said in my posts, basically moderating me and my ability to be my authentic self, even though that was the company tagline, bring your authentic self to work. So it's really interesting about, how do we navigate these things? I mean, should we not care? I mean, I'm old enough in my life now where I'm just kind of like, I am who I am. And I'm really not about conforming at this point, right? I'm not 20 years old again. So I'm very curious to know how you ladies see your public images on LinkedIn, and if you basically only post things about your personal, your job, your career, or do you actually flex a little bit more and let people know who you are as a human?
Yeah, I love that question. I go back and forth. I used to be really big on LinkedIn and really building up my personal brand. And for me, what works the best is to be as honest and authentic as I wanted to be. And I was going to let people know what I felt the most comfortable with, but with layers. Like, I don't want people to know a whole bunch about my personal life. And that was comfortable for me. But as somebody who works in DEI, I can get into some of the topics that are a little bit more spicy than some of my colleagues may be able to. And I can talk about race, I can talk about sexuality, I can talk about a lot of things that some people feel like, ooh, these are things we're not allowed to talk about at work, but I feel more comfortable with. Over the last year or so, I'm on LinkedIn a lot less because I've transitioned over to TikTok. And TikTok, I really feel like I can just show up however I want. And that's like where I've been able to build an audience very easily and build a community that's worked better for me, because I feel like there's so much showing up as my best professional self versus showing up as my best self, that's what the big difference is for me with LinkedIn and with TikTok. So LinkedIn, you're going to get me normally pretty dolled up. You're going to get my ideas really well formatted and the way that I want to be seen as a professional. But on TikTok, even though it's still my professional account, I can hang out a little bit more loose, and that just feels more easy for me. So I think it depends on the platform.
My Facebook and my LinkedIn are pretty similar for the crowds that I'm talking to. Facebook, though, very much people who have actually met me, they probably know me or they know me directly from somebody else, where LinkedIn does have that. There's people who are looking at me who I've never spoken to before. And I understand people being one of those people who's been laid off and been laid off while my LinkedIn, I know the audience that's looking at my LinkedIn and I know how I have to show up there. I do. ChatGPT and LinkedIn is my friend. It's very helpful. And then I've many times, either my partner or Kathleen or other coaches or mentors in my community, if there's things that I'm not sure about with LinkedIn, I will get a fact check. Like on my Facebook and social media, I do like these stupid videos, like funny dad jokes or like random content where like I build an airplane out of a paper box, like just dumb stuff. And even though it could be work related and be good for work people, it is not content that I'm comfortable putting on LinkedIn, because then all of a sudden I'm chancing coming off as more flighty and dumb and not serious on LinkedIn. And the people who are important to me looking at my LinkedIn outside my community, and of course community is important, being who I am and all of those things, but where I am exactly now, my LinkedIn is important for my career. And so I need to make sure that the people who are hiring me are seeing the professionalism in it, which I think is the big difference between my socials.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, if I can, I'm gonna tell you a story. So all three of my daughters are technical and have very different careers. My youngest right now, it's interesting that you say that, Desiree, because she is deeply embedded in influencer marketing and working in social media and whatnot. But her preference is to be incredibly professional in her LinkedIn, and even pairs back on the Facebooks of the world where prospective employers tend to lurk, and is more her authentic self on Instagram and TikTok and whatnot, right? But it's been very interesting as she's been looking to expand this. So taking what you said and pairing back and whatnot, she's all of a sudden, because she's going out and looking for new employment. And because she's been in influencer marketing and is incredibly proficient in it, but isn't an influencer herself, because she's decided to pare it down. Again, thinking your audience, she's struggling to move from the place she is, because they're saying, well, you should have this massive following and you should, and she's like, but I'm not an influencer. I help influencers be influencers, right? So it's a double-edged sword when you start thinking about it. I will be quite honest with you as well. HR goes out and they look before they send things to the hiring manager. They go out and they look and see what you're doing on LinkedIn. And to Noelle's point, staying very professional there, a little bit looser and a little bit more fun on Facebook. Those are typically the two places they're going to look. And there's a lot more allowance for being your authentic self and what I'm going to call more casual platforms. So just thinking again about, I go back to reading your audience and where's your audience living and working and playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly, Desiree, exactly.
Yep.
So,
Kelsey, what would you add to that?
yeah, I have a bit of a different experience. I feel like just because of where I'm at in my life, I've grown up as social media has grown. And so part of it is like, I've always been told everyone's going to look at anything you're posting, like future employers are going to see this. And I got into a car accident once and I posted about it and I complained that my Dr. Pepper had spilled all over the floorboard. And I remember at the time, my grandpa said something like, the insurance company is going to see that and they're going to think that you were distracted. And I was like, well, with my privacy settings, the insurance company is not going to see that at all. But it's kind of moments where it's like, okay, I understand screenshots exist and things can get outside of privacy settings, but kind of thinking about what control you have over who sees what is really valuable. I am very much so a fan of segmenting my platforms. So when I was first applying for jobs, I didn't really know what I was applying for, and I was looking at social media marketing as an avenue, and almost all of those applications required a Twitter account. They said, post your Twitter handle here. And I didn't want to put my Twitter, I didn't want to have to clean up my Twitter. I didn't want to have to lock it down. So I made a work Twitter, and it's Kelsey at work. And my personal Twitter doesn't have my name attached to it. So I can still have my fun, retweet the silly stuff, and not have to worry about what someone at work might think because I have a work one. The same for my Instagram account. It's very locked down. And truthfully, between LinkedIn and Facebook, on LinkedIn, even, I don't accept people I don't know or I haven't interacted with in some way. As an internet safety, being a young woman, you're always told, like, don't talk to strangers. And Facebook, I'm even more strict with it. I don't want some work people on my Facebook. And there's definitely this, for me, like guilt almost, where it's like, okay, I have this one work friend, but I don't have this one. I'm not posting bad things. I have my grandparents and my aunts and stuff on my Facebook, but it's just like, I don't want to have to worry. That's what LinkedIn is for. That is the place that I'm providing you information about my life. And I am also a very prominent user of LinkedIn. And I feel like I post so much that anyone I know in a professional setting really doesn't need any more than that. So yeah, I'm a very big fan of segmenting and keeping things locked down. And I mean, that's why privacy settings exist. Like I've had to work through the guilt of not allowing certain people on certain things, but it's for my own good, their own good. Like it's an interesting place that we live in when people can just search you up on anything. I've had it where I meet a person once and they go through and they try to add me on every single platform. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
I know you like that. I don't need your Snapchat. I don't really want you on my Instagram. And so like navigating the, like the social cues, almost like the social standards, is very interesting for social media specifically, especially with work friends, work colleagues.
So you're doing something I've done for now about 6 or 7 years. I used to have a Facebook that was wide open to the world. The whole entire world could get on my Facebook. And then I realized everybody was looking at my kids and my grandkids and my dogs, and I didn't want that. And so I shut it all down. And I brought it back to the 180 some odd people that are family or friends that are like family.
Yeah.
I do have a Facebook that's 100% work related. And my Twitter is mostly work. And I have 2 separate Instagrams. I have an Instagram for work people and an Instagram that is full of my grandchildren, the dogs, and things that I find amusing to me.
Yeah.
I think of it oftentimes like who should come into your house and who should not. And there are some people that I'm very happy to meet you in an office setting, but I'm not necessarily going to invite you home for dinner. We don't know each other that way. I'm not sending you Christmas cards, not sending you a birthday cake. There needs to be a little bit of space between us. And I think sometimes we just have to do that with our social media as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the pieces that's coming up for me, because I'm hearing the importance of having separate spaces for things, and I think that definitely does work. But an extra layer that I would say, and I don't think that it's a problem for anybody that's here in this group, is that screenshots are forever. And we have all seen horror stories of somebody who thought that they were safe because their name doesn't have their name on it, and they say something that's problematic online. And people, I'm telling you, people on TikTok, people on Twitter, people all over social media, they need like a little FBI certificate. Like they will find you. So it's so important that the things that we put on, that we recognize no matter what I'm doing in this world, I'm still representing my organization or I'm still representing my company. And this can come back to me no matter what. So I may have some stuff out that's on there that really like people know about my opinions and all of that, but I never put anything online that I know if my boss saw this one day that she would think, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with her? This is a real big issue. So it doesn't matter if I'm posting in a group, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm always representing my company. It can always bite me in my butt. So I just feel like that extra layer of caution is helpful. It doesn't matter how private your stuff is. Screenshots, y'all, forever, forever.
So let me kind of wrap us up here as we're getting in today. And I have a question for each one of you. So I'm going to go around and ask each one of you to answer this. But as you think of someone that's listening to this today or that watches the replay, how would you tell them to be their most authentic self, either in the way they dress or the way they post? And Sue, we're going to start with you.
I would, and this maybe goes against the grain of what we've been talking about, but I think that being your authentic self has an awful lot to do with who you are in any given situation than it is about the, as I said, the costume that you wear, right? So for Desiree speaking earlier about, people coming up and telling her that a peaking tattoo means that she's less than. If the message that's coming out on the stage and the wisdom that she's sharing is spot on and applies to the audience, then it is, in my personal opinion, not Desiree's responsibility that individual has a problem with her tattoo. He needs to pull up his big boy boots and get over it. That's my thing. It's be your authentic self and know that is who you are inside. And the outside can change, the custom can change, but be your authentic self from who you are here.
Jen, what would you add to that?
Oh my goodness. Well, we're talking about being yourself. And as women, having to, whether we're in a professional setting or with our friends, I firmly believe that it is less stressful when you show up as yourself. Now, regardless of the lessons you've learned, because Kelsey, Susan, and I think our moms went to school together because they were all the same. They all said the same thing. You're wearing my name, you're out in public, blah, blah, blah. But that said, I think we're just be you. And, I can't help how I was trained when I was earlier. So now this is who I am. I'm going to show up as Jen. I'm going to have my makeup on and be dressed professionally because this is just who I am right now. This is not an affectation. This is just now part of my persona. And Desiree, I would say to anyone that's offended by your tattoos, they can go turn their head, but this body art is part of who you are and what you wanted to express. So I just say, those people aren't, maybe that's not who you want to deal with because they can't accept you. Do you know what I mean? So I just say, be who you are and embrace that and be with people who make you feel good. You don't have to transact with people who don't make you feel good.
Noelle, what would you add to that?
Approved. The dog's approved. Desiree, you're fine.
What I would add, what I would want folks to take away is I think that it's really important to understand what your personal brand is. I think that it's important that we identify those things, and that for me is where my comfort level is. I feel most comfortable when I'm on camera with a red lip. That is for me. I know people that are very comfortable, feel like their best self in a really nice quality t-shirt or having their hair a certain way. Whatever it is for you that feels like I feel good, I feel powerful, I feel like the way that I want to show up on this, figure out what those things are, and then also understand what your personal brand, what you'd like that to be online. I think that while being authentic is wonderful, there are some things that we just have to keep for ourselves. There are some things that I feel like we need to have protected because everybody isn't owes all of me, right? So I love being able to show up, like showing up authentically in a meeting to me. Sometimes we'll be letting people know, hey, I have dyscalculia, and if you need me to work on this spreadsheet, I'm telling you now, it's going to take me a lot longer than anybody else. And just being open with that. But that doesn't mean that I need to share a lot more than that. That's enough for them to get a little bit more of me, being able to be honest and authentic of what is my capability, and then also being able to let people know what feels good within my own boundaries. So yes, authenticity is wonderful, but having some strong boundaries and being able to show up in a way that makes you feel good is really what I feel like is the goal. I'll never feel comfortable disheveled on camera. I'll never feel like I can be, I won't feel like myself. That may be something I need to take the camera off for, because that just makes me feel more comfortable. But that's not everybody. So it's understanding the way that you really like to show up and being able to kind of stick to that. And it also makes shopping a heck of a lot easier when you know what your personal brand is too.
Yeah.
Kelsey.
Yeah, well, I will say, just because Des plugged the CRO podcast earlier, I too have a podcast. It is called Actually a Podcast, and my counterpart, Morgan McBride, and we actually have done an episode on showing up authentically in the workplace, and it's been really cool to get everyone's perspectives here. Jen, to your point of, showing up in a way that's not always you, we really hit on, you can't fake a personality all day. You can't wear a mask all day, all night, at happy hours. So yes, choosing what you want to share and just showing up as yourself is important. I think there's a lot of power in it. I work in a very male dominated space, as most of us do. I have been making friendship bracelets post Taylor Swift concert last summer, and I've been giving them out at events, and it's really funny to see some reactions of men. They don't mind them at first, but then, you mentioned Taylor Swift and they're like, oh, no, don't like her. And I think that there's a lot of power in just showing up and being like, look, you can either, like, you don't have to like her. You don't have to like her music, but like, you don't get to sit here and bash someone just because women typically like it. I don't know. I feel very strongly that showing up for what I stand for, like, there's a power in that, and not just sitting back and letting people say things. Everything that we do represents us, our families, our companies, all of those things that we've hit on. And don't we want to represent that in a way that brings all of them joy and happiness as well? So,
Yep.
yeah.
All right, Des, your final thoughts on this.
Can we have like 3 more hour conversations? Like, can we just keep police forever?
You know what? We can inside the network, but LinkedIn kind of limits how long I can do this online.
This is a really good conversation, and we really didn't even start to even talk about, okay, so when am I allowed to get hand tattoos? Does anyone have an answer to that? No?
Today, yeah, go for it.
So no, but I'm not allowed to, because that could hurt my career. And so that is one of the questions, and one of the things that we've been talking about so much is, what do I decide for my life that I want to push against the boundaries to help open the doors behind me and possibly halt my career? Where do I want to be? I know, Susan, when you started this, you started talking about who do you want to work for? Oil and gas, Calgary, Alberta. I knew really young that I couldn't work in oil and gas. I don't have a personality for it. I can't deal with those suits. They don't like me. They just don't like me. But I chose to work, and I was lucky that I found tech, but I chose to work in industries where the boundaries, where it was more about my brain, my personality, and the relationships and the network of the people who know me and who believe in my value because they actually know me, or they see me for the person I want to be and the person I am. So do we want to, and everyone, I would just say anyone who's listening to this would be my takeaway. You can choose to be the person that pushes the boundaries and opens the door, but that might stop doors for you, but that's fine. Or you might choose to be the person who just wants to get to the top, so you can open the doors when you get to the top. I don't know where I think I fit, kind of in the middle, where I just am me. It's funny. I don't have different personalities. If you guys are on any of my socials, it's all the same. Pretty much the ADHD me doesn't have the idea of putting things in buckets. It's just a whole nother, that's just way confusing to me. So I am literally the way I am pretty much everywhere I am. You could probably expect me to hear my voice saying the same sort of conversation in every room that I'm in. And that's how I will choose. And I think that's important to be that, those different options are there for anybody. And unfortunately, sometimes it sucks for yourself, but in the end, I really hope that it helps I don't know, the community and the people around us.
Well, what I've heard today are some great conversations around remaining authentic to your true self, but always remembering that for every action, there is a reaction, right? So perception does pay, and people's perception of us does become our earning reality. And still navigating this area, we need to have those open conversations with the people that we're working with and the people that we're working for. And you're right, Des, there are opportunities for us to decide, when are we breaking through barriers and kicking in doors, and when are we actually climbing ladders. And I hope that everybody that's listened in on this conversation in the lounge today has heard something that they can take and really go forward with. I encourage everybody to join us at ALN.network. We would love to carry on this conversation with you, and also encourage you to take some additional courses that might help you figure out where your authentic path is. So signing off for ALN. Yes, ma'am. Go.
Wait.
What?
We got a sneak peek in. We're doing this again, and we're going to
that's
cover
right.
really
We
good
are.
topic. Talk about this. We had an idea. Kathleen is really good, and you guys should do this. If you have an idea, you just message Kathleen, and she's like, "Cool, we'll do it." So I had an idea. We're going to try, with all of the unfortunate layoffs and everything around us, we're going to do another one of these, bring in some guest speakers of their experiences getting laid off, the things that they did to work through it, the mental health conversation around it, the networking, how to build your network. All of those conversations are something we're going to do on May 10th as well.
Oh, there we go. That is my authentic self. Bring me an idea, and my answer is typically, yeah, let's go do that. That is as authentic as I get, just because, well, I like problems and I like finding new ways to solve them. So with that, I want to say thank you, Des, Kelsey, Sue, Jen, and Noelle. Thank you for lending your voices to this very important conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Enjoyed it very much. Thanks.